Let's dive into the SEC. Talk about let's just get a broad stroke overview of leading into the season. Kind of what your thoughts are on the top teams and how if we're no predictions or anything, but just the beginning of the season with the top teams.
Well, my prediction for the past month has been LSU national championship. So I realize where I'm saying this, and we're on the record. We get it on the record early. Just so by the time that's the other thing is I like going into SEC media days knowing how I feel about specific teams, so that I'm not just gassing everybody up and saying that everybody's going to win at least 9-10 games, because Lord knows that can't happen. But I do think that there will be a sense of urgency for the SEC contenders, because no matter who you are, you can spin it as we're right there. And I wonder how that's going to impact a team like Georgia, which, coming off of consecutive years in which it missed the college football playoff semifinals after being the preseason number one, how much is that reflected with the offseason that they've had, with the portal urgency that they've had? What about a team like Texas, that is the only team in college football that consecutive semifinals heading into this year? How much is that sense of urgency there, even though everybody's going to be talking about the start of the Arch Manning era? And then a team like Alabama that everybody is pointing and laughing at, everybody's calling their shot, whether they're Thomas Castellanos or Diego Pavia. You don't have to be 5'10" to call out Alabama apparently anymore. And I can say that because I'm 5'8", but there are just a lot of people that are saying, hey, now is the time for Kalen DeBoer to show that he is capable of being the Nick Saban successor in Tuscaloosa. So I do think that sense of urgency is going to be really interesting to see from all of these programs, that look, you don't have to spin it in some weird way. You were on the outside looking in of a national championship, and in the SEC, that's more than enough to be able to kind of get the fire started in the offseason.
Connor, who takes the biggest step back from where they were a year ago, and who takes the biggest step forward?
There's part of me that wants to say Ole Miss takes the biggest step back, but I think that's a little bit unfair, because I'm an Austin Simmons believer. I do think that if you put he and Tua Tagovailoa in the same room together, you wouldn't be able, even though there is a little bit of a height difference, but both lefties, and I swear they have to be related in some way, shape, or form. And the fact that this is a guy that is 19 years old who has already graduated college is just an absurd thing. And I do think that defense is going to regress this year. So Ole Miss is kind of the obvious candidate, but South Carolina might be a little bit more obvious, even though they have the thing that they have lacked in so many years, which is the returning stud quarterback. And they've got a guy on the defensive side of the ball in Dylan Stewart that might be one of the 10 best defensive players coming back in college football this year. But go ask 2022 Alabama what it's like when you have that stud edge rusher and that unbelievable quarterback. You can have those two things working in your favor and have all this. It's really difficult if you don't have that complete team. And as we know, 2022 Alabama did not make it back to the college football playoff that year with Bryce Young and Will Anderson. So I think that South Carolina is the team that is probably most likely to regress, just because I think they played at such an absurd out-of-body level during the latter half of last season.
Yeah, and they got a really great guy under center as well. So I kind of want to switch over to the quarterbacks, because I'm always going to lean heavy on the quarterbacks. We all know you can have the greatest team in the world, but if you don't have a guy under center calling the plays, directing the offense, then your odds of winning championships at least go down significantly. So we got a lot of top guys in the SEC that are in the short list for the preseason Heisman rankings. So a lot of returners, but we always know that there is somebody that doesn't get the preseason hype, maybe a newcomer in the quarterback rooms at some school that busts out and has a bust-out year. Is there anybody like that you see in the SEC this coming year?
There's a lot of buzz about Ty Simpson. Now, maybe Ty Simpson is too obvious, but somebody that hasn't started at the college level, that was a former 5-star recruit who's now entering year 4 at Alabama, who stuck with that coaching staff. Maybe he's the guy that, kind of emerges, that he's not going to be in these way too early top 5 quarterbacks. I'm fascinated by Marcel Reed too at Texas A&M, a guy that is kind of in that maybe second or even third tier, depending on what you look at. And in Colin Klein offense, I'm really bullish. They returned that entire offensive line. This is a ground game that if they can get Le'Veon Moss back, coming off the torn ACL that he suffered at South Carolina last year, this could be one of the best 10 ground games in all of college football. There's a of hype for Reuben Owens, who was hurt last year and then returned late in the season. Marcel Reed is a guy that you should not sleep on, especially if Casey Concepcion steps in from NC State and is that go-to receiver that he looked like he was as a true freshman a couple of years ago. A&M is a team that, look, nobody's going to sit here and pencil in A&M to get to an SEC championship. That's a program that has not played in a conference championship game in the 21st century, not just since they've joined the SEC. But I think Marcel Reed is so intriguing because the pieces around him are really, really favorable. And he's kind of being slept on as that guy that, oh, you know what, he's not necessarily in that top tier, but he showed a lot of in that first year, I guess if we can even call it that, as a starter in College Station.
Connor, we were talking earlier about Mizzou, and it feels like we're not having a Mizzou conversation. Nobody is, good, bad, or indifferent. Like, nobody's talking about Missouri. And if you look over the last 4 years, they've been one of the most consistent programs in the SEC. You know I love my guy Drink, but like the golden age of Missouri football, Luther Burden and Brady Cook and Theo Weiss and Cody Schrader, all those guys are now gone. That's just the offensive guys. Not even talking about the first-round picks they've had on defense. Why are we not talking about Missouri?
Well, I mentioned this to you, I think it was last week. Their schedule is a joke. Their schedule for an SEC schedule, guys, look at this. You don't see a single team on that schedule that won 10 games last year. They don't game until week 8. How in this year of college football is that even possible that they don't have a road game until week 8?
That's crazy.
Yet, like, they have one game in a non-bordering state. Their schedule's just weird. It's just really weird. And look, people gave Indiana a lot of crap last year. As an Indiana grad, I had to kind of take it on the chin for that schedule. Indiana was playing the two teams that played in the previous national championship. You look at Mizzou's schedule, and if Mizzou is all of a sudden in contention in November, we're going to have these conversations, and Craig Sankey's going to be going, wait a minute, I did all this campaigning about how difficult SEC schedules are, and you look up at Mizzou's, and you're kind of like, wait a minute, that is as manageable as it gets for an SEC slate. And you're seeing that divide because there are a lot of teams in the SEC that obviously don't have that benefit. A team like Arkansas has one of the most difficult college football. Florida as well, I'd put in that category. But Mizzou, we could be talking about them a lot more if they're able to navigate what is a really, really favorable start to their schedule. Obviously, Bo Perbula's got to be that dude coming over from Penn State. And if Ahmad Hardy looks every bit as good as he was last year when he was a 1,300-yard rusher at Louisiana Monroe, we'll be having those conversations about this Mizzou team not having any sort of big-time regression.
Connor, I can't tell you how much I'm rooting against Missouri because the guy across the table from me cannot stop talking about them. Like, that's all he talks about outside of LSU. So I'm going to ask you like a question that's going to make
Connor
you mad.
knows I fall in love with one team like that every offseason.
It's usually Kentucky, but Kentucky can't be that team right now. Like,
No.
Kentucky until further notice, they're on the back burner. You can't fall in love with kind of the offseason vibes that we've seen in Lexington.
So I'm going to piss my partner off over here because I'm going to ask him about another school outside of LSU besides Missouri. Let's take a look at Oklahoma. Last year, 2-7 in the conference, like at the bottom of the list, towards the bottom of the list in the SEC. What is now they're coming into 2025 and one of the top hardest schedules in the SEC. What kind of emphasis do they have? What kind of pressure do they have to perform early for a fan base that expects to at least be in contention for a conference championship?
Yeah, it's a really difficult team to evaluate because part of me that says, man, if it hits right this year, Oklahoma's a playoff team. And I was saying that last year. But there's also this lingering doubt when it comes to Brent Venables evaluating an offense. And the decisions that he's made, most notably Arnold over Dylan Gabriel, who was not exactly holding Oklahoma with what he was asking for before he ultimately hit the portal and went to Oregon and became a Heisman finalist. There's a sense that if Brent Venables gets the offense wrong again, it's curtains. And that a program like Oklahoma, which does not have to pay head coach buyouts, has not had to be willing to pay, $35, $37 million. I can't remember what the exact number is for Brent Venables, and to move on. Now, there is an expectation that John Mateer can be that dude, though. And, I had his coach, Jake Dickert, who was his coach at Washington State. I had him on my show a couple of weeks ago. And he's like, I think he's the best player in college football, which is a wild thing to hear a guy say, considering the way that it kind of played out with both of those guys leaving Washington State. But John Mateer is sort of this ultimate wild card in the SEC. And if the pieces around him with an improved offensive line, with Deion Burks coming back, a receiver that I'm really high on, should do really good things out of the slot there. If their offense is, then you're like, wait a minute, you're going to pair that with a Brent Venables defense? That team can handle itself in the SEC, and that team can win 9 games. But it's all going to come down to how they manage that offense. They got to stay healthier than they were last year when just a rash of injuries hit them before the calendar even turned October. But Oklahoma is one of these teams, man, that I think we kind of have to throw out the 2010s of expectations for them, as proud as they are, and understand this is a new world that they're dealing with. And coming off the year that they had last year, they have a huge hurdle to overcome this year.
All right, there he is, Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South. I mean, just couldn't get him on the phone. He didn't give up. Too gritty to be pretty.
Never
Jumped
give
on
up.
the Zoom. We can appreciate that. Connor, looking forward to seeing you in a couple weeks, brother.
Gentlemen, appreciate it.